Morning is reputation. And so I want to start off, I want to read Matthew chapter 16, verse 13. I want to read that verse, and it says, "Now when Jesus came into the district of Caesarea Philippi, he asked the disciples, 'Who do the people say that the Son of Man is?'" And so Jesus is with his disciples, and he's been around them. He's been preaching publicly and things like that. And he simply asked them this question: who do they say that the Son of Man is? So I want to start off with asking you a question this morning. And the question is, what is a reputation? You know, what is it? When you hear that word and your brain hopefully starts to work because you've had plenty of caffeine this morning and you're engaged and you're ready to go, what do you start thinking of when someone asks, what is a reputation? What you're known for? Who people think you are? Your history. What was the other one? Your past. See, reputation is the overall quality or character as seen or judged by people in general. So the overall quality or character as seen or judged by people in general. So it's what other people think of you. It's what other people say about you. So my question to you is a reputation important? Yes. See, and that's something that, for me, I grew up in the 90s. So there's a few of you out there that probably are in that same era. But we were kind of taught, at least the culture kind of taught us, that you shouldn't worry about what other people say about you. I kind of wonder how many of you have actually said that out loud. Like, I know I have. I think in the past I've said, it doesn't matter what other people think about you. You do what you want to do. Or that sort of mentality it's something that I think maybe it was way before us, but I know that was one of the driving themes, if you grew up as a kid in the 90s, was you don't worry about what other people are saying about you. You do you. That was kind of the theme. And, as I got a little bit older, or maybe slowed down to even think about what that meant, I think I started to realize that might not be the best way to live your life. Because what will end up happening is you will stop caring about what other people think, and then other people will stop caring about you. And that tends to be the result and the way that life plays out. You stop caring about what other people think about you. They stop caring about what you think about them. The next thing you know, there's this separation, there's this divide, and all of a sudden you're all alone. And you wonder why everyone else is a jerk and won't talk to you. That was like a little side note, but that's kind of where that goes. So the question is reputation really important? And so for that, I started studying through what the Scripture says about it. What does the Bible say about your reputation? And what I found was there's like over 20 verses that talk about your reputation and how you should respond and treat your reputation. Proverbs 22:1 says, a good name is to be chosen rather than great riches, and favor is better than silver or gold. A good name is to be chosen rather than great riches. So it matters more about what Solomon is saying here in Proverbs. He's saying it matters more about what people think about you than it does making a lot of money. And I know that's a little bit contrary to what publicly we think. We think that I've got to provide for my family, or maybe you're chasing the American dream, and you're thinking, I got to have this, and I got to have this, and I got to have this, and if that means that I got to maybe alienate people from my life or do whatever, then that's what I got to do. That's the most important. But Solomon, who, if you know Scripture a little bit, was known as the wisest man to ever live, said, a good name is to be chosen rather than great riches. Paul tells Timothy in 1 Timothy 3:2 that an overseer must be above reproach. Now, that's typically, an overseer would be somebody who is a leader in the church, one of the elders. But Paul's telling Timothy that your reputation is important, especially as a leader. It should be above reproach. In other words, no one should be able to come to you and have anything negative or bad to say about you. And I would probably add that if you read that in context, it's probably like within something that's evidence. Like, people might always have something bad to say about you, but there shouldn't be any evidence to further that investigation. So how much thought do we put into what people think about you? How much thought do we put into what people think about us? Like, do we spend much time considering what our reputation is? Or are we simply going through the motions and doing what we do and kind of laser focused on our tasks and what we have to accomplish tomorrow? Have you ever asked, or have you ever wondered who people say you are? That's a scary thing it would be a scary thing to know, but it would be kind of nice to know, like, exactly what people thought of you. Like, when they, the inside voice in their head, not what they tell you outside. But it might be a little scary what people say about you or what people think about you. One of the questions, that I started thinking about was, how do people describe you? You know how, somebody will come up and they'll say, "Hey, do you know that Gary Hewitt guy? What's his story? What's the deal? What's the deal with him?" And then you would say, "Gary is a fill in the blank." Easy. Gary says, let's leave that for later. But how do people describe you? What do they say about you? And then the question that would naturally follow that is, how do you want them to describe you? How do you want to be known? Do you want them to say things like, "Oh, well, they're my neighbor, or they're father, mother, they're friendly, they're outgoing, they're rude, they're private"? Where is that? Do they describe you by your vocation? "Oh yeah, so and so, they're a teacher, or they're a mechanic, or she's a housewife, or they're an accountant, or a banker, or a factory worker"? Do they describe you by your vocation? Sometimes that's the only context we have for people, but also sometimes that might give you a little clue to something that's really important to them. But maybe that's the only thing people know you by is your work, not your character. What does the way people describe you mean? What does it mean, and what does that say? How does that affect you? How does it affect them? If they say, "Well, yeah, man, he's just super friendly guy, like he's always helpful. Like anytime you need anything, he's always there to help out." One of the most influential men in my life that most of the time I fail at replicating his influence was from this church was Randall Elliott. And it was crazy when you would walk in the building. I mean, any building that man was at, he made you feel like you were the most important person in that room. And I don't know if it was instinctual. I don't know if he had to try to do that. I don't know what it was, but that's who he was. He was the most welcoming, most selfless man that I think I have ever had the honor of knowing personally. Like, and if for some of you who know him and you remember him, like, you could not walk in a room without him coming and shaking your hand and asking you, "How's your family doing?" And, "Oh, I saw this would happen the other day. How did that turn out?" Like, he would just engage. And I, honestly, that's a huge weakness of mine. Like, I'm normally one-track mind guy. Like, so sometimes you'll see me walking around here and I'm like a zombie because I have something on my mind and I have to go do it. And Randall was never that way. Randall was always about what was going on around him. And that's his reputation became well known. Like, I'm not the only one who noticed that about him. Like, you can go talk to people that knew him. And that's what I mean. How does your reputation affect you? How does it affect everyone around you? Does someone's reputation affect your behavior towards them? I'd say absolutely. If I walked in the room and I saw Randall, normally within 10 or 15 seconds, I'm smiling. I'm like going to see him. Or if he doesn't find me first, that's an effect your reputation has on you. And some of us probably don't have the best reputations in all circles. I would say, I think I've been guilty of this probably just this week. I'm not the most warm and fuzzy, outgoing, social butterfly of a person. That's not in my character. And, I kind of like to be by myself a lot. I kind of like to do things, on my own. And, sometimes that affects that can affect my reputation. That can affect how people see me, how people treat me, things like that. And I know that goes both ways. I know I behave differently around people depending on their reputation. If someone's a thief, if they have a reputation of a thief, I'm probably not trusting them with my property. If someone's a gossip, then there's probably some stories I'm not going to tell them. And our opinion of someone does impact our relationship with that person. Now, there's this really great story in the Bible of how your opinion of someone can change the direction of your life completely. In Matthew chapter 16 is where we're headed. But I think it's important to stop every once in a while and think about who we are and how people see us. One of the things that we forget too often as we walk around with a label on us as Christian. All of us that have decided to believe and follow Christ, we have chosen that label to wear. That's something that no one put that on us. We accepted that. And, if you break down the word, if you go back and study the word, Christian means little Christ. It was kind of a derogatory term that the first century church picked up. They were kind of making fun of them because they were like, oh, look at the little Christ running around. And because these people were trying to be like Jesus. They were originally, and I think more fondly, called people of the way, because Jesus used to walk around saying, I am the way, the truth, the light. No man comes to the Father but by me. He said that so much that the people that followed Jesus were known as people of the way. But then when they started picking on him and making fun of him, they called him Christian. And I think it's interesting now that we've taken something that was meant for bad and we have chosen to accept that label and accept that and said, yes, that would be the greatest honor I could ever have if someone called me a little Christ. If my reputation was reflecting Christ so much that that's how they saw me, if that's truly what they were meaning when they said Christian. And this is why I think our reputation is important. And I think the biggest reason is because it's not our reputation. The Bible tells us that we are not our own. We were bought with a price. When you lay your life down at the cross and you say, Jesus, I want to follow you. I want you to be Lord over everything that I have and everything that I am. You are laying down your life, and your reputation is no longer your own. In Matthew chapter 16, verse 13, it says, now when Jesus came to the district of Caesarea Philippi, he asked the disciples, who do people say the Son of Man is? And they said, some say John the Baptist, others say Elijah, others say Jeremiah or one of the prophets. And Jesus takes a little turn in this conversation, and he says, and he said to them, but who do you say that I am? And Simon Peter replied, you are the Christ, the Son of the living God. What was he asking in verse 13? What was the question he was asking in verse 13? What was the answer he was looking for? His reputation. He wanted to know, who do people say that I am? He was asking them, what is my reputation in the community? That's that question that I mentioned earlier about, it'd be great if you could actually figure out what people thought of you, not just what they say out loud, but what they actually think of you. That's what Jesus was asking. He was asking, what do they say that I am out in Caesarea Philippi? But then he asks a different question. He asks, who do you say that I am? And who answers him? Peter. Peter answers and he says, you are the Christ, the Son of the living God. Jesus' reputation with Peter was different than Jesus' reputation with the people. That's what disciples, that's the call of the disciple. Who is Jesus to you? You know, there's a philosopher, if you read old books from dead people, there's a philosopher named Soren Kierkegaard, and he said the most important question for everyone to answer is, who is Jesus? The most important question for everyone to answer. And in one way or another, everyone does answer. And if you look at Peter's answer, it's a lot different than what the culture and what the community was saying about him. What does it mean to answer that question like Simon Peter answered it? What does it mean to answer that he is the Christ, the Lord, the Son of God? It's a lot different than, oh, he's a good guy, he's a teacher. He's a prophet maybe. He's a good leader. It's different than, that's different than saying he's Lord. He's the Son of God. And I think that's the question that Kierkegaard was looking for, the distinction between, there's a lot of people that say that, yes, Jesus was a teacher, he was a prophet, he was a great man, maybe even there was a miracle or two that happened around him. But it's a completely different way of looking at Christ to say that he's the Son of God and he's the Lord of my life. That what Peter said to him, that he was the Christ, that was eventually what got Jesus killed. It wasn't the miracles, it wasn't the political uprising or whatever, it was he declared himself to be God. And because of that, the Jewish people said, well, he's obviously either a madman or he's blaspheming God, and he needs to be killed. Simon knew that by saying that Jesus was the Christ and the Son of God, that he could be killed too. I mean, think about the weight of that question. It's almost impossible for us to even understand what that would mean. We can read stories, for those of you who like reading books and like stories about this stuff. There's a book called The Fox's Book of Martyrs. You can pick it up. I think DC Talk actually even co-authored a book called Jesus Freaks. And they're kind of the same thing, but they tell stories about men and women who have laid down their lives because they answered the question just like Simon Peter did. When the question came, who do you say that Jesus is? They weren't just worried about public shame or, well, this person may not like me anymore. It was life and death for them. And still today, in some countries around the world, there are still people being martyred for their answer to that same question. Simon knew this could get him in a lot of trouble if this was the choice that he was going to make. He knew that if I answer this question like this and I believe it, then my life won't be the same. Things are going to change. The way that I approach my everyday life, the way that I change, that my routines and my daily walk is all going to be different because now my reputation is no longer my own. He also knew that if it was true, he would have no choice but to change. Kierkegaard was also famous for saying something else that was, what ought I do? In other words, so what do I do with what I know to be true? So if you're willing to step up, and a lot of us have, to step up and say that Jesus is God, that he is Lord and Savior, the next question you have to ask yourself, so what should I know, or what should I do with what I know to be true? What should I do Does your reputation match the reputation of Christ? Is it a reflection of the reputation of Christ? Because that's the call we have. That's the call, that's the choice that we've made to step up and say, who is Jesus? He's Lord. As you accept that, that puts you on a path of following a man who laid his life down for the people he loved and cared about. Jesus knew that the disciples needed to make the distinction from prophet, reincarnate old dudes, John the Baptist, and the Messiah. He knew that there needed to be a distinction. He wasn't just a teacher. He wasn't just a prophet. He was God. Otherwise, their belief was just an immortal man who was a great teacher. But at some point, that belief would become too shallow. He knew they would run the risk of being the fair weather followers, game day attenders, people who made excuses the rest of the time. He knew they could turn into half-hearted, convenience-based believers who wouldn't be able to stand when things got tough. He knew nothing could be built if they didn't believe he was God. And he also knew that if they believed that he truly was God, that their whole lives would have to change. For those of you who've studied the rest of the Bible and the history of the disciples, you know that for years, in some cases, they chose to die instead of denying Christ as God. You know, there was several of the Peter himself was martyred. They boiled him alive, kind of dipped him in tar, and then hung him upside down on a cross. The reason why they hung him upside down on a cross was because he said he wasn't worthy of being crucified like his Lord was. He said he wasn't even worthy of the cross. So instead of hanging him right side up, they turned him upside down to hang him because he didn't want to be hung like Christ. He was willing to go all the way to the end. You don't do that if the man that you follow is just a good teacher. At some point, you're going to say, no, I'll pass on the whole dip me in tar and turn me upside down and hang me on a cross thing. Yeah, the guy was a good guy and he was great, but I'm okay. But that's not what he did, and that's not what a lot of them did. John lived almost his whole entire life, or the end of his life, in prison. He was beaten and bound with chains, and the Romans had this really cool way of chaining people up to the ground. You guys have all seen the movies where they got the shackles on the wall and they hang them out like this and all that. It's not actually accurate. What they would do is they would chain them up, and then they would twist their bodies and contort their bodies and chain different parts of their bodies together to where they would be twisted and bent and then couldn't move for days. I mean, can you imagine being put through that kind of torture and that kind of pain, and the guard comes in and says, okay, who is Jesus? And you're willing to say, he's God. All right, I'll see you next week. It's a different thing when your reputation is not your own. When your reputation becomes Christ. And you're willing to, no matter what, I'm going to reflect Christ and not be concerned about my reputation. I want to protect his reputation. So the question that we have this morning is the same question that was to them. What is Jesus' reputation with you? Who do you say that he is? Is he God? Is he Lord of all the earth? Is he the Messiah, Savior, your King? If you claim that as true, how can you live your life the same way? How can you not be changed by that? If that is truly what you believe, there should be evidence to reflect that. Let's look at the last part of the story and let's see what changes. Matthew 16, verse 17 through 19. And Jesus answered him, "Blessed are you, Simon Bar-Jonah, for flesh and blood has not revealed this to you, but my Father who is in heaven. And I tell you, you are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of hell shall not prevail against it. I will give you the keys of the kingdom of heaven, and whatever you bind on earth shall be bound in heaven, and whatever you loose on earth shall be loosened in heaven." Simon became Peter. You know, that's one of the parts of the, maybe if you're not familiar with the story of the disciples, you may not realize Peter wasn't always his name. He was born Simon. And I don't know, it probably means something really lame. But the cool thing is, when Jesus changed his name to Peter, it's actually, the word is Petros, which actually means rock. So see, we have this guy on TV on our movies called The Rock. He wasn't actually The Rock. It was actually Peter. I'm just saying if you're awake. Jesus changed his name to Peter. And it was an image. It should, anytime somebody would hear his name, it would reflect, okay, oh yeah, that's the guy that Jesus said he was gonna build the church on. He got his name changed. He was blessed by God. And if you study the rest of the story, you realize that Peter became the preacher of a church in Jerusalem. And it was like basically the first church, the first group of followers that were people of the way in Jerusalem. And in one of his first sermons that he ever preached in Jerusalem, thousands of people got saved. Thousands. Jesus told Peter that he would build his church on him. That belief, that admission that Jesus was Lord and Messiah changed Peter's life to where now the promises of God were fulfilled through him. It's an amazing thing when you get to be a part of something that God's doing. When you get to be a part of, when you join up and you say that, I want to serve the King. And then he says, okay, this is what we're going to do. And you get these opportunities to join in with on things that you know, that you see God doing, and all of a sudden this amazing stuff starts happening. Peter was a fisherman. Let's give you a little more background. He was a fisherman. His dad owned fishing boats. He was not a politician or a public speaker or anything like that. And you look at this story, and he starts preaching in Jerusalem, and thousands of people start following Christ. I mean, that's not a normal thing. Like normally you would think, okay, great preacher, great pastor. He probably went to some school and he probably studied under some other great pastor, and maybe he did some sort of an apprenticeship thing for 5-10 years or whatever. No, Peter was on a boat and Jesus said, "Follow me," and he said, okay. And 3 years later, he said, "I think you're God." And then he starts preaching. Like time doesn't matter to God. You know, there's that saying that we always throw around that, you know, God doesn't call the qualified, he qualifies the called. That's Peter's story. What is God wanting to change in your life? What is God wanting you to be involved in? What is he challenging you? What is he saying, hey, we could do this? And you're still dragging your feet and you're still hesitant. You know, God doesn't call us to sit back and watch, because that's not what his reputation is. His reputation is someone who changes lives. His reputation is someone who takes brokenness and heals it, and not only heals it, but then he uses it. If you're willing to accept that it's not my reputation anymore, it's his, your life needs to change. There should be evidence of things that God's doing in your life. There should be things that he's doing in your family and in your friends and in everyone around you. There should be change. So the question that we have to answer for all of us is what is keeping the change from happening? And I can tell you, from my personal experience, 99% of the time, what keeps that change from happening is me. I normally get in my own way. Or I come up with excuses, or I get tired, or I do this or that, or whatever other excuses. You guys probably have the same ones, maybe better, or whatever. But I'm normally the one that keeps that from happening. I start to become more worried about my reputation than his reputation. So maybe we need to answer the question. The same question that Jesus asked them at the very beginning. Who do you say that I am? That's the challenge this week. As we go back into our routines and we go back into our normal, everyday stuff, stop and think. Who do I say that Jesus is? And if you answer that question, that He's Lord and that He's Savior, then you need to start looking, okay, how am I reflecting Christ? How am I showing people who Christ is through my life? Take inventory. Don't just get caught up in the monotony of everyday life and the routines that we go through. And, I got to do this on Monday. And this Tuesday night, we got this soccer match. And then, Thursday, we got to meet here for the school thing and whatever. Don't just get caught up in that stuff. Stop and think about, okay, while I'm doing this, what impact have I had? Who has been changed? What has been changed? What do people think about me? Do they say, they're a reflection of Christ? Who do we say that Jesus is? That's the question for us to answer this week. Let's pray. Father God, I just thank you for